We're going to kick things back off with doing more with less, getting greater value from mobile quant from Michael Sosnowski of TRC Research, which, by the way, they put on the coolest event every year, the Frontiers of Research, a very small conference that just is focused on combining academics with practitioners. I had the privilege of speaking at that earlier this year. It was the honor of the year to be at that thing. I was the warm-up act for these heavy hitter academics that just blew me away. So they have a great foundation in academia. Michael's a great guy. Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Lenny. Thank you. And if you were the warm-up act, I'm not quite sure what that makes me. And of course, following a great panel, a lot of pressure, a lot of great stuff I've heard today, especially on the qualitative front. I would like to get a little quantitative. Specifically, I want to talk about the notion of doing more with less, what that means conventionally, and what it could mean, dare we say, what it should mean for mobile quantitative work moving forward. I want to challenge some existing assumptions we may have about what we can and can't do on mobile devices. And to do that, I want to take a look at a couple of online studies we've done, the analysis from those studies that I think will point the way to what's possible in the future. And lastly, I want to share with you the results of a mobile study we did, which I think is a great example of doing more with less on mobile devices with mobile quant right now. So more with less, of course, is something researchers are pretty familiar with. More surveys to be done, shorter timelines, shrinking budgets, increasingly the consumers themselves who are, still willing to answer our questions, but not perhaps as much as they were willing to do so before, perhaps not when and where we want them to. And so, mobile, for sure, is a way to help us as researchers with this do more with less problem for reasons that have been discussed, many times already over the last 2 days. Powerful way to get to hard to reach populations, to get into places and at times when we haven't been able to get into before. And I think also part of that larger contract that we want to have with respondents, with consumers moving forward, which is they tell us they'll still answer our questions and we won't torture them. So all of that is great, and as we tilt more towards the mobile platform, as we rely more upon mobile, I think it's just important for us also to think about the fact that from a quantitative perspective, the most interesting, the highest value generating projects we tend to do, things like conjoints and prioritization, Max-Diff, things along those lines, things that require simulators and what-if scenarios and simulations that people use to drive the business. These things are a little more complex. They require more from us as researchers, and they ask a little bit more from our respondents. We need to embrace this mobile imperative, but we also have to account for these sorts of studies in the work we do. At least that's my opinion. Because my concern is that if we don't, we'll marginalize ourselves. We'll find ourselves doing a lot of what studies, providing some color, but not really driving the business, not really providing the why that the best quantitative work can do right now. Of course, a lot of our focus has been short and sweet. A lot of the conversation still revolves around 5 to 10 question surveys, real simple response dynamics. Let's assume the respondent has little time, little patience, little attention span. And I'm not up on the stage today to say these are things we don't have to worry about. I think they're all good things for us to be concerned about. What I do want to say, though, is, and I think all of us kind of realize this intuitively, when we look to maximize the respondent experience, we're necessarily doing so at the expense of information value. We're getting less information, less valuable information out of them. And we don't have to. As quantitative researchers, we have other tools in our belt, and we've had them for a long time. We've got, thoughtful, creative, appropriate design. We've got, powerful estimation tools and analytic abilities. And I think it's those three things coming together: design, user-friendly experiences, really powerful estimation. I think it's those three things together that define the notion of really effective mobile quantitative work moving forward. Really, if we're going to do more with less, it's not all the way less. It's balancing these things. And I guess in the end, what we want to do is tell ourselves what we often tell our clients, and that is, don't maximize on any one of these three things. Optimize. I put this phrase up here. I figure, well, it's not right behind me. It's over there, and it's back here, and it's here. I think this is a fairly good way to summarize conventional wisdom. You can't do conjoint on a small screen. It's just not going to work. But let's take a step back and think about why we do this work in the first place. We need to build successful products, services, and offers. To do that, we need to have a really good understanding of consumer preferences. And at a fundamental level, we tend to believe that the best way to get at those preferences is to have them make choices or trade-offs. Now, there's nothing in my mind that would change that philosophy just because respondents are mobile. In the end, we really don't do this work. It's not a philosophical reason why we're not doing that, at least from my perspective. It's pretty practical. We think they tend to require just too much for a mobile service, too many choices we have to show people. Or the choices themselves are, they're just too complex. So it's not going to work in a mobile environment. These are reasonable objections that, again, no real argument that these are reasonable objections. But if we're thinking like optimizers, being a little optimistic, then we can turn these objections into challenges that we can overcome. Specifically, one is a challenge of estimation, and one is a challenge of design. Let's look at the challenge of estimation first. And I guess another way to say that is, how many choices do we really have to show people before we get good data? And let's leave aside what's good data for a second. From my perspective, that means really useful results for the organization. And to illustrate my point, I want to look at a conjoint study we did, consumer preferences for HD TVs. By all respects, a very conventional conjoint study, right? 7 attributes, brand, price, different specs for the TV. Each respondent was introduced to a core choice task, discrete choice. Here's profile 1, 2, and 3, or you can choose none of these. And to get the maximum design for this set of attributes was 13 choice tasks, 13 cards an individual had to see. So this is a study we did, online study. I'll show data in a second, but there's of course a lot of different ways to decide whether or not you have good conjoint data. And I don't want to debate that here. But one common way to look at it from a data perspective is, hit rate, or how well can we predict choices people will make in a holdout task based on the information we got from the conjoint task. And can we do that with, a minimum of error in general? And we look at the results from the study, and you see we were able to predict with 68% accuracy what people would choose in a holdout task. Now, I don't know how many people look at these data. That's solid data. That's solid conjoint data. It's very much in keeping. It's certainly much better than chance. It's very much in keeping with about the high end of estimates you tend to get in discrete choice studies, and certainly the type of data that we use all the time to build products and services. But we don't have to limit ourselves, we don't have to use all 13 cards. Because of the design of the study, because of the way we estimate results, we can calculate our utilities as if we had fewer cards. And when we do that, we see that even with as few as if we had shown people only 3 choice tasks, we'd still do a pretty good job. Again, better than chance, errors up a little bit, but pretty good. And then when we look at 6 cards or 9 cards, we get into that neighborhood, we're not doing much worse in terms of our ability to predict people's choices than we did when we did the whole 13 cards. Maybe we don't need always to give 13 cards or the maximum number of cards. Maybe we don't need to maximize on that thing. And I don't know the right answer exactly where that number is, but these sorts of data, I mean, it's data we could all look at our conjoint studies this way. It's nothing proprietary. But I don't know if we often look at it this way because we don't have to. When we think about mobile, I think it's more like we have to because we have to think about how many choices we're showing people. The next challenge I said was a design challenge, and again, I would kind of restate that as, do we have to show choices as complex as we think they need to be shown? Can we simplify them? And for this particular study, another online conjoint study for a mobile carrier, and the main question was, when people's contracts come to an end, are they going to stay or are they going to go? So, 9 different attributes. In this case, they're mostly yes-no attributes. And the twist for this particular study wasn't, we didn't follow the traditional discrete choice sort of here's multiple offers and again choose none of these. We decided to say, let's do it simpler. Let's just make it a take it or leave it sort of situation. Your contract's up. Here's an offer. If that's the offer, are you going to go or are you going to stay? And when we look at it that way, we again find we got very good, very useful results. Our clients made great use of these data in terms of planning their business decisions for the coming quarter. Very good hit rate, again, better than chance. Chances were right around 50% here, and low error. And I think what this demonstrates is that the choices can be simplified. We can look at stark yes or no things and still get really powerful information from it. Information that our clients will use to build products and services. We can return to our skeptical, conventional wisdom researcher, and that person I can imagine saying, okay, so conjoint on a mobile. We don't have to show as many choices as we thought, and those choices don't have to be that complex. Maybe it's just one at a time. Maybe this will work. That's great, I think, for our future, and that's all right. I would encourage us all to be thinking about that as we move forward. But what about today? Where can we start, optimizing and doing better, more insightful quantitative work on mobile devices today? I think a great place to start is tournament-based prioritization techniques. I assume there's fairly good familiarity with Max-Diff in the room. Are people generally aware of the tournament-based approaches to prioritization? Is there any? Great. So it's not a presentation on that anyway. So, for those who don't know, it's sort of a cousin of Max-Diff. It's a way to kind of more efficiently work your way through larger lists. And it's also, just in general, it requires fewer questions. It's a little bit more relevant, I think, to respondents who are answering based on things they already told you as opposed to just going through choices. And while that's great or good for online research, I think it's great for the mobile platform because it brings together these 3 things we're talking about. You need to have thoughtful design. You still have a pretty simple response mechanic for each choice. And you can use powerful estimation tools on the back end to get more than simple analysis out of it. Imagine you're going to the movies. What do you see? Where do you go? This is an everyday prioritization problem. We thought about it at TRC. We just stopped at 18. There's so many things you can think about. And if you wanted to do that as a Max-Diff study, it's 14 different screens that maybe aren't always so relevant to the respondent anyway. But if you look at it from a tournament-style approach, it's only 9. So still a lot, but not as many. We're thinking at TRC, that's more mobile appropriate. Let's test it out. So we did. Got some help from the folks at ClearVoice who helped us get to not just mobile respondents, but people who we knew were doing the survey on their mobile device. So all of these 414 individuals on the mobile device. It's a 20-question survey, so not ridiculously long, but not restricted to 5 to 10. And the main job here is look at these, across the survey, check out these 18 different reasons why you might choose a movie. What's most important to you? What's least important to you? The task itself, and confirm it, thanks to the folks at Confirm who helped us make sure it tested out really well across all different platforms. But as you can see, it's a very simple response mechanic. For each choice, what's your most and what's your least important. Worked extremely well. And the results we get, I think, confirm that we can do some really, more value-added work, quantitative work besides short and sweet. Of course, we get the rank ordering of importance, high to low. That's what you'd want from any prioritization study. But because this was a tournament-style approach, we get individual level utility scores. We're able to identify tiers of importance, distance between ranks, and make really strong recommendations. These results can be segmented by pre-existing segments. They can be, you can make preference-based segments on these sorts of data. And then as a bonus, we did this study online as well. And the results are very similar, not in lockstep, but very, very similar. It's the type of thing that if I was to make recommendations to my client and I had done this study either mobile or online or in some form of hybrid, just let them respond sort of way, I feel very comfortable making pretty much the same set of recommendations. So that's the data. And I'll just sum up with a few points before I go. More with less mobile, more with less quantitative mobile, I think needs to become, in the end, more than short and sweet, more than fast and cheap. If we don't, I think we risk marginalizing ourselves. If all we ever do is 5 to 10 question profiling, point of purchase, what were you thinking about now, useful stuff, but it's color. It's a lot of what work, it's not a lot of why work. So if that's all we ever do, that's all we'll ever be asked to do. Let's remember, as researchers, we have more tools in our belt than programming and formatting, and we should use them. We have design, we have estimation. It's probably not a controversial point in the room, but it's relevant right now. I can imagine doing this stuff. Sorry, I got distracted by the 1 minute time. I can imagine doing this right now in store if you wanted to measure what are people thinking about in the moment, but I want to do more than just ask them 2 questions. I could see doing it. I can see, whether it's 5% or in B2B situations, I do some software work. It's a lot more than 5% of people who try to access surveys, through their handheld. Okay, let them do it, because it's the same basic response mechanism. So it's relevant right now. And I think it's more than relevant right now. I like to think about all these sorts of innovations in mobile quant. I think it helps research in general, because if we can figure out how to do really powerful, useful, more complex things by simplifying a little on the mobile device, well, why wouldn't we do it everywhere? I mean, why wouldn't we go back and just change the way we do the online work? Why do all these complex things we don't need to? And lastly, be an optimizer, not a maximizer. That's my final message. So that's what I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Really interesting presentation there. Did you get any feedback on the mobile surveys where you did ask respondents to do more than just the 5 or 10? Or did you experience any significant drop-off rates in terms of respondent participation?
Nothing more. Again, in the end, it was still about a 6 to 7 minute survey, so it was not exorbitantly long. We didn't see anything unusual in terms of drop-off. I don't have those numbers, but I do remember having this conversation. It was nothing like, oh, we have a problem, nobody's doing this survey. We did it pretty willingly. And again, it was a pretty simple set of questions. And because when you're doing more of a tournament style approach, it is, again, I think it's more relevant, because I already told you I don't like some things. Don't show them to me again. Well, I'm not going to show them to you again. So you kind of go through and you know what you're doing. So we didn't really see anything negative in that regard.
Hi, Maya Husar with Alexandra Babbage. Are there any limitations with using skip logic in mobile surveys? I just talked to some of the vendors outside. Some of them don't offer that right now.
Right. We're able to do this. We work with Confirmit. There was no mobile app here. This is really just taking our basic survey, the way we'd set up the question, making sure it formatted really well across platforms. So that made it very easy for us. We're not into developing custom apps for custom individual studies.